Hello, thanks, Miriam. This is going to be my talk, Neo4j and GraphQL, the past, the present, and the future. You can find the slides at the bit.ly link in the bottom right, and there will be a link at the end of the slide deck as well. So my name is Darrell. I work in software engineering at Neo4j. I've been working in the GraphQL team since January 2021. Today is actually my first day in the Neo4j London office, so it's an exciting time. I work on the official Neo4j GraphQL library, but I've been working with GraphQL, building GraphQL applications for several years before working at Neo4j. You can find me on Twitter at Darrell_Warde. And if you want to get in touch, you can email me as well at darrell.warde@neo4j.com. So what's in this talk? I'm going to be giving a super brief introduction to GraphQL, but I'm really hoping that the demos I give will give that kind of extra depth that you need. So I'm not going to go too in depth there. I'm going to talk about Neo4j GraphQL JS, which we'll call the past, but really it's the foundations of everything that we're building on today. I'm going to talk about the Neo4j GraphQL library, which is the present, and I'm also going to talk about what's coming up for the library in the future. And there's going to be just a few resources at the end. I'm not going to be talking about anything that's not JavaScript or TypeScript, so you may be familiar with a GraphQL database plugin. I'm not going to go into that today, and I'm going to be focusing more on the API library section of our GraphQL tools. There's also not going to be loads of slides. I'm going to try and get into doing some live demos as soon as I possibly can and keep it as interactive as possible. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is both a language for defining and querying your data, and it's also a server runtime to kind of parse that language and produce meaningful results from it. So on the left, you can see you describe your data. We have here a type project, and inside it, there are a number of fields. GraphQL is a strongly typed language, so you'll see the name and tagline there have a type string, and contributors is a list of users, and user will be another type elsewhere in your schema. Then in the middle, this is the GraphQL query language. And you can see here we're querying for a project with the name GraphQL, and what we're doing is we're asking for that tagline back. Now, when you execute that query against the schema that you defined on the left, you get back predictable results in the form of JSON results, which you might be familiar with from elsewhere. And you can see that they exactly match what you've queried. So you've got project, which was the name of your query, and then tagline, which is that single field that you asked for, and that's exactly what you're going to get back. Now, GraphQL is super agnostic, so you can use it with anything, including Neo4j, and that's always been the case before there was any official support at all. But there was a number of pain points with doing this. There was a lot of boilerplate code. You have to write what's known as resolvers in order to translate that GraphQL into whatever you're doing on the back end. So in the case of Neo4j, translating that GraphQL into Cypher would mean lots of repeated boilerplate code, which really kind of slowed you down as you were developing your applications. Developer productivity, as a result, wasn't great. You were spending a lot of time writing boilerplate code rather than writing valuable, introducing valuable features into whatever you were building. It's also very difficult to extend, or it was very difficult to extend a GraphQL API for Neo4j in the past as well. And performance was often not great. With GraphQL, you often suffer what's known as the N+1 problem, which means as you go down your tree in your graph, you essentially kind of add more and more queries. So you could be executing 10 queries against a database to fetch a single set of data rather than one. So Neo4j started looking at GraphQL API solutions, which you can see on this diagram would sit in the middle. So they're sat in the middle of the GraphQL client and the Neo4j database. And originally, this took the form of Neo4j GraphQL JS. Now, Neo4j GraphQL JS was a Neo4j Labs product. So it was essentially an experiment to validate that GraphQL and Neo4j could work together. The engineering effort was on a best endeavors basis, and there was never really a guarantee of new features and bug fixes. If the team was busy elsewhere, sometimes that library might not get any updates for a while. And support was always through ad hoc communication channels. There was no official support for it if you were using it in a production application. Compare that to a product engineering product, which are essentially they're stable, robust, and performant. And there's always a dedicated engineering team and product managers for each product. There's also going to be regular improvements because of that dedicated engineering effort that's there, including updates and bug fixes. And there's official support, in addition to kind of ad hoc support as well. We're pretty active on Discord, and we were on Slack before Discord, and we really like to engage with our user base. So Neo4j GraphQL.js produced a CRUD API. You would give it, let's say, this simple type definition for a movie. And from that single type definition, you would automatically get a create mutation, which allowed you to create a single movie. You would get a query, a movie query, which allowed you to specify a number of arguments to filter and also sort and paginate your results. You would get an update mutation, which allowed you to update movies, and also a delete mutation, which allowed you to delete a movie. As we come back to that pain point of boilerplate and developer productivity, here we've got automatically generated resolvers for these, and also a full CRUD API through a single type definition. However, there were some downsides to that. The API was not so consistent with GraphQL best practices, including the use of like input types at the top level. There was just a lot of loose arguments at the top, which made it not such a great developer experience to use. There was only ever singular operations and mutations. You could create a movie or update a movie, which meant it could be complex to create large subgraphs. There was also non-comprehensive authentication and authorization, which can really, for production applications, is quite essential. This is not really kind of, in my opinion, these are like kind of really quite objective things about the old library. But it's not all bad. Neo4j Labs set out to prove that Neo4j and GraphQL can work well together. And here we are today, and it's become very clear to us that Neo4j loves GraphQL and they work excellently together as a tech stack. In addition to that, the Grand Stack was born out of these experiments. Now, this is a really popular collection of software which allows you to build full stack applications using GraphQL, React, Apollo, and the Neo4j database. And people are often using this to prototype full stack applications extremely quickly using a Neo4j database. And the Grand Stack continues to live on despite the fact that Neo4j GraphQL.js does not. And this takes us to the present with the official Neo4j GraphQL library. The package name is Neo4j GraphQL, which is what you might see floating about. So what's changed? We've given it a complete rewrite. We took the best bits of Neo4j GraphQL.js and we gave them a fresh lick of paint. It's written in TypeScript to bring the type safety of GraphQL and Neo4j together. It got a very comprehensive test suite which aids development, improves quality, and prevents regressions. And you have compatibility with Neo4j's latest and greatest, including Aura-free, professional, and enterprise tiers. What hasn't changed, though, is that we're still 100% open source. You can see everything we're doing on GitHub. We accept contributions from the community. We welcome bug reports, feature requests, the works, and that's all out there for anybody to see. We still do an exact one-to-one mapping of GraphQL to Cypher. So a single GraphQL query produces a single Cypher query, which ensures excellent performance whilst working with a Neo4j database. And you're still getting that great automatic CRUD API with resolvers automatically done for you. So I'm going to dive into some demos. You're going to have to excuse some switching between windows as I sort through all of this. So here we have Visual Studio Code with an extremely simple application using Neo4j GraphQL. This is the index file, and in here all we're doing is we're defining a Neo4j driver. We're importing our type def from a different file, which we'll look at shortly. And then we're constructing a Neo4j GraphQL instance, which is how you instantiate an instance of the new library. Then we're constructing an Apollo server, which is a popular GraphQL server, and we're just passing in our GraphQL schema into that. And then finally, we're just listening on port 4000, you can see down in the console here, I've already done this, and the server is available on port 4000 there. And then inside our type definitions, we're starting with something really simple. I have an idea for a really basic API where there's movies and also users who own movies. So I'm thinking about like a DVD and Blu-ray collection here for a person who owns several movies. And this is all talking to a free tier database. I've got this open in Neo4j browser here, and you can quickly see that if I match n and return n, this is a completely empty database, nothing in there, and we're just going to get some data in there using the Neo4j GraphQL library. So, kicking off, I've got GraphQL Playground open here, and I want to create myself as a user. Now, this is this GraphQL query language I talked about. So you specify that you want a mutation, and you've got full autocomplete here in GraphQL Playground, which is a really great developer experience when you're experimenting with building a new application. And I'm going to say there's an input. I can fully autocomplete here and say, I want to create a user with name Darrell. So that's great. Here we've got like a similar single creation of a node like you did with the old library. This is going to be nice and familiar. I can just hit Control-Enter and run that, and that's there. I probably also want to create some movies, so let's do that. Get my mouse out of the way of that. And we're going to go input. We're going to do an array. We're going to do a bit of copying and pasting here just to save a bit of time, as no one wants to see me typing out loads of movie titles. And then we're going to get the title of all of those movies back. So I'm expecting this to create 3 nodes in a database. And there we go, that's done. So if we jump back to Neo4j browser here and run that query again, you should be able to see that those 4 nodes are in there. But it's not very graphy, right? They're not very well connected together. So let's look at connecting some of that data. So if I now jump back to GraphQL Playground, if I update users, and I'm going to say where the name, oops, is it? If I have a colon there, where the name is Darrell, and what I want to do is I want to connect. So it is an operation we have available underneath this mutation. And I'm going to connect movies. And what I want is another where clause. So I want to connect to movies where the title is Batman Begins. And what we can ask for the users back and their name, which is just being me, but you can also nest down and ask for the nodes that were created there. I prettify that and then run it. You can see that that's now connected. Now, I have another mutation here, which I'm going to copy and paste in. And this demonstrates that actually there's different ways of going about this though. So you can also update movies, but there's some more advanced filters, like the title starts with The Dark Knight. So we have The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. So I'm expecting that to connect both of those movies to an owner where the name is Darrell. And if I execute that, you can see that both of those movies are now connected. If we now jump back to Neo4j browser and execute our query again, you can see that those 3 relationships have now been formed, and this is starting to look a bit more graphy, and this is great. So I want to extend this out a bit. We talked about extensibility as being a pain point. So what if I, for instance, wanted to see how many movies a user has, which is going to be an integer? We can use a cipher directive here, and we can say what statement we want to run. And now, hopefully, a bit more familiar cipher here. This is the variable that the current user node is mapped to. And what we want to say is user owns movie. So if I put the extra little end of that relationship in there, and then I'm going to return the count of m. So I'm going to see how many movies that I own. If I save that, That should automatically refresh in there. Now we can go back to GraphQL Playground and we can get our users, we can get their name, and we can get their movies count. And you can see that's just automatically right there. And we should see that Darrell owns 3 movies. Now, let's grow out our API even more. Let's say we wanted to see which actors were in a particular movie. You can see here we have an actor type. We'll actually just give that. So we're saying an actor has movies, and this relationship directive also needs to go into movie as well, but the other way around. So we're going to say a movie has actors, which is an array of actor. And we'll just copy and paste that relationship directive. And all we need to do is change that direction. So you can see there's generally you're going to have a relationship directive on either end of that relationship. We can save that and jump back into GraphQL Playground. Now this is a long one, so I am going to copy and paste this in. I'm going to be a little bit lazy here rather than typing all of that out. But let's take a look at this. So we're creating some actors. We're saying an input. There's only one. We're only creating one actor here, and that's Christian Bale, who of course played Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect him to the movies, where either using this or block here, the title is Batman Begins, or the title starts with The Dark Knight. But let's go further. Let's also create a couple of other movies he's been in. He's played in The Big Short and American Psycho. Now, I don't own The Big Short, but I do own American Psycho. So let's connect that to an existing owner where their name is Darrell. So you can see here we're building up a bit of a subgraph in a single query here. If we execute that, you can see all of that data is now in there. And if I jump back to Neo4j browser and execute that again, you can see this graph has just grown, almost doubled in size from that single GraphQL query. We call these nested mutations, and it allows you to traverse your graph and mutate things as you go along. So now I own 4 movies, and there's also an additional movie with no owner, but Christian has acted in American Psycho. Brilliant. I'm just going to jump back to some slides now. Maximize that out. And away we go. So what you've seen some type definitions. You've seen batch mutations creating multiple nodes in a single mutation. You've seen some custom cipher in the form of that movies count field, which I added to my type. And you've also seen nested mutations, which allows you to mutate an entire graph through a single GraphQL mutation. There's also some amazing auth features in the new Neo4j GraphQL library, but I'm not going to talk about that because my colleague Dan is going to be talking about this in a few hours' time in his talk, Securing Your Graph Using Neo4j GraphQL, which I really encourage you to watch. So let's move on to the future. Features still to come. A lot of our users of the new library have been asking for relationship properties for a long time because these were present in Neo4j GraphQL.js. But let's take a look at that. These are some type definitions from that old library. You can see the relation is slightly different, and also you haven't got type inside that directive, so slightly different. But if you wanted to add relationship properties to this, you had to completely change your type definitions. You had to add in this new type, but you had to specify this from and to specify the direction of that relationship. But then you had to completely change the type in your movie and person type to this acted in type, as well as removing the relation directive. It worked, but it wasn't a great developer experience in terms of incrementally growing your application. So we wanted to completely review that before we introduced it into this library. And we're pleased to say we've come up with something that we feel is really, really effective and allows you to very quickly grow your application as you need. So all you do is you introduce an interface, and that defines your relationship properties. It's an interface because this is going to go in either direction of that relationship. So it's going to be used in multiple places. And all you do is adding in this properties argument into the relationship directive, which you've already got in your graph. So let's jump straight into that and take a look at what we've built. Let me switch windows again. So let's stop this application. And what we're going to do, I'm using yarn here rather than npm, but I'm going to do yarn add Neo4j GraphQL at next. This is going to install a version of the library with relationship properties involved. Let's add in that interface. Interface owns. So this is for that owns relationship. And I want to say a format. So do I own it on Blu-ray? Do I own it on DVD? We can see here we got the user and movie type. We need to add in that properties key here. So properties is owns. And we're also going to add that in on the other end. Now we're going to start that application again. Now, I imagine I will be slightly short on time, so I'm going to rely a bit on copying and pasting here. But if we jump back into the playground, and let's copy in a query for users. But you can see there's this new movies connection field which has been added. And as you can see, this represents edges. And each edge has that format key that we've added. And then you can finally traverse to the node on the other side of that relationship and get the title. So I'm going to execute that, and you can see here that Darrell has many movies connections. The format is null on each of these, so it's not too great. Now this connection is they're known as GraphQL cursor connections, and it's almost like an appendix specification to the GraphQL specifications. We really wanted to stick to something quite close to a GraphQL spec that people are familiar with for introducing this. Now, I think we should add in a relationship property here. So I'm going to copy and paste in another mutation here. And I want to update users where the name is Darrell. And I want to update movies where the node title is American Psycho. And I want to set these properties. I want to set properties format Blu-ray. So it's basically saying Darrell owns American Psycho on Blu-ray. Now, if we execute that, you can see we're going to get all of our edges back again for myself. But now this relationship property has been introduced. No clearing down of our database, no massive changes to our type definitions. We've been able to grow our application, introducing these relationship properties when it was time to do so. Now, if we jump back to Neo4j browser and execute this again, we can take a look at this owns relationship, and we can see down here that the format is indeed Blu-ray, and that's made it through to our graph. Jumping back to slides. We're extremely excited to announce that Neo4j GraphQL 2.0.0 Alpha 1 is now available for you to use, and you can install this using npm install at Neo4j GraphQL at next, as I did in that demonstration. And the documentation is available at this link. This will also be available at the end of my slides as well. We really encourage you to play with it. Let us know how it's working for you. It is an alpha, so we are still adding a couple of features, and there'll be plenty of bug fixes before we do a stable release. However, it's not just that we're going to leave this app. This whole connection specification that we've introduced is actually there for cursor-based pagination, and this is something that we want to introduce. So now that we've got these relationship properties, then we have this connection type now with edges. And you can see the movie has actors connection, which has a couple of arguments on it. All we need to do is grow out our schema a little bit, and we can begin thinking about introducing cursor-based pagination with no breaking changes to the schema to get it in. We'd add in a couple of pagination arguments in first and after, and then a page info object, which describes if there's any pages left for you to go through. So a query for this might look like, let's say, I'm going to get the movies where the title is The Dark Knight. Then I want to get the first 10 actors. So I'd execute that. What I'm going to get back is I'll get that the edges, which are going to be those actors' details, but then I'm going to get this page info object, which has a has next page and also an end cursor. So because there's a next page, if I wanted to go and get that, I'd execute essentially the same query again, but I'd pass in that cursor which we got from that previous query, and that would get the next 10. And then there's another page with another end cursor, and we can keep on rotating about that. Not something we built yet, but this is exactly what it would end up looking like, and we really can't wait until we can build that. We're also extremely excited about introducing aggregations, which would allow you to do counts and sums and mins and maxes over your data, to allow you to get a bit more value out of your data without exactly querying the exact fields. Unions and interfaces are a feature that we offer, but there's always room to improve, and we really want to improve the support for unions and interfaces in the library. We want to add support for indexes and constraints to allow you to better manage, control, and query your data. And we also want to look at GraphQL subscriptions, which would give you kind of real-time updates based on when data has changed in your database. And this is part of the GraphQL spec. Also in the future, but only later today, there are 3 talks left to do with GraphQL. So in a few hours' time, Dan, as I've mentioned, is going to be talking about securing your graph using Neo4j GraphQL. Then later, Will Lyon from the developer relations team and one of the developers of the original GraphQL library is going to be talking about best practices for using Cypher with GraphQL. And then straight following that, Arif, who's been working on Hot Chocolate, which is a .NET library which allows you to query databases using GraphQL, has been working on a Neo4j integration for that, which will open up Neo4j and GraphQL to the .NET world, which is obviously a very different world to that of JavaScript and TypeScript. And that is me. I hope I'm not too short of time. As a cheeky little plug, we are hiring in the GraphQL team, and I encourage you, if this sounds like something that would be really interesting for you to work on, to come and join us and build a great library for people to build applications with. And as already mentioned, here are these resources. You can get in touch with us on Discord. We're pretty active on there. We get some really great user feedback, which really drives the direction that we take for our development. We are on GitHub. There's also Discourse, which is a more formal forum for requesting help with the Neo4j GraphQL library. You can find these slides and the middle link here, and also the example code that I showed during this presentation is available on GitHub under my username at nodes2021, and feel free to have a play with that, especially if you want to play with the new relationship property stuff. And then, of course, our documentation is available for the stable and also the new 2.0 alpha. Please take a look at that. And that is me. Thanks very much for listening to my talk.